Thank you for joining our webinar with Jethro Data, Tableau, and Data Realty. And I'm really excited about this talk today. Today we're going to have a customer use case where we're going to show you what analytics can achieve when you really let the software get out of the way and just take care of the analytics. My name is Mike Kravec. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Jethro Data. And I'm going to start off the presentation with a brief overview of what Jethro is. Then I will pass the presentation over to Tom Panozzo, who is the CTO of Data Realty. And he's been a longtime customer of Jethro, a longtime customer of Tableau. And he'll show you what he's done with our technologies and how he's able to bring value through analytics. And then Vaidy Krishnan from Tableau is going to follow up and talk about some more big picture things with Tableau as far as how Tableau fits within the big data ecosystem. So by the end of this presentation, you'll see how Jethro and Tableau are really like chocolate and peanut butter, and you'll see what a great combination it can be. So let's get started. So I'd like to start off with talking about the struggle that's in the enterprise. And that struggle is not really born from like problems or failures, but they're born out of success. And that success is what's come out of the modern BI era, and mainly through Tableau. Tableau has made it easy for people to ask questions of your data. You know, in fact, I've always said it's even trivialized asking questions of data. But that brings some challenges and also some additional issues. So the data that people are asking for is getting bigger. And that doesn't have anything to really do with the whole big data thing that everyone talks about, but this is really the data that people are looking to ask and analyze from with Tableau. The concurrency is getting significantly higher as well. Larger applications, use cases going out to the public. And what this does is it pushes traditional methods of optimizations really to its limits. And people need to look at other alternatives. And this leaves a few alternatives for enterprises to go to. You know, the first one is kind of a brute force method. They task their IT teams with doing data engineering projects, taking their existing EDW and eking out as much capacity, concurrency, and performance they can. This winds up being more of a data factory type of methodology because they will get use cases from the business or from people, and they'll try to optimize those use cases. So they're always a step behind. It's always reactive, and it can be very costly. The next method is just taking the data and putting it up to the cloud. This is really attractive because of the speed to value and the initial costs. But when you're looking at self-service BI and you're looking at ad hoc analytics that Tableau can bring, it does provide a bit of an inhibiting factor when you're charging by the amount of data that you store and you're charging by the number of queries that you execute. So it has a tendency to slow down adoption and to slow down the realized value of analytics. The last method that we see people doing is placing a big bet on Hadoop. And the Hadoop story is really compelling. Greater scale, greater flexibility, less rigidity, and significantly less cost. The challenge comes in is the expectations that have been set by original EDW systems, Hadoop has a challenge living up to. So some traditional SQL on Hadoop solutions can achieve some speed, but they're typically based on full scan engines. And those, just like they sound, full scans, they work really hard. By doing MPP, by increasing the parallelization, you can decrease the latency, but it's still not decreasing the amount of load that's going on the cluster. You're just making the cluster bigger. So let's talk about how Jethro plays into this. We're a little bit different. We are an acceleration layer, so we're a transparent layer that sits between Tableau and your big data. We're showing Hadoop here, but this can just as easily be one of your large data volume EDW vendors. We have several methods, or 3 methods actually, of performance acceleration. So we automatically do caching, we index the data. We index all columns, in fact. And we also create automatic aggregations or autocubes on the fly. This creates really self-service data acceleration that can support and nurture self-service BI. So there's no IT-centric data engineering. There's no projects that need to occur before you can get faster analytics from your data. And it automatically adapts to your applications and fits quite nicely as is. We like to call this at Jethro EDW performance at Hadoop scale and cost. And what that means for us is having billions of records of your data sets that can return in seconds for BI queries, scaling up to thousands of users, and being very easy to use, easy to install, easy to bring on use cases. So we work with Tableau workbooks as is. You're just creating a new data source and right-click, replace data source, and you're essentially done. Or you can just publish the new data source onto data server. So again, no data re-engineering. Now, how is this done? We create one optimized set of the data set. So when we identify or a customer identifies the data that they're looking at through Tableau, so the tables and the join structures, very much like what you'd see in a data connection. We look at that data and we'll create an optimized version of it and store it back on Hadoop. So we create all of the indices and we start to collect those automatically created cubes and they get stored back on the Hadoop layer. So the data never leaves Hadoop. As far as overhead, we're looking at about 35% additional storage. And in fact, if we have heard from customers who have used multiple projections in Hadoop to do some level of optimization, they were able to get rid of those extra projections and they were able to reduce the amount of data. When it comes to query time, we look at the pre-indexed and pre-aggregated data. So Tableau is going to connect to Jethro using generic ODBC, using SQL. And Jethro interprets that SQL statements and comes up with an optimized version of it that leverages cubes, indexes, or even both. It significantly reduces the amount of required resources that other full scan engines need. And in fact, I have a savings of about 300% in many cases. Now, how we're able to do this is we took a look at how BI queries are and noticed that BI queries range from the highly repeatable, so the lower right in this little graph, to the upper left quadrant, where it's highly filtered but low repeatability. And we noticed that each one of those sections does not have a single, I should say one method cannot service all of the different kinds of queries that BI or Tableau sends to a database. So when you're looking at the high level queries, we would wind up using our query caching. When we drill down into significant detail, that's where indexing kicks in. And for the middle of the road type of queries, the slicing and dicing, that's when autocubes come into play. Our indexes are, again, they're automated, and in fact, we're indexing every single column. They're extremely effective because since we're working, our speed is dependent upon the working set. The farther you drill in, the faster you get. And we've eliminated the need for additional partitioning, which was a very expensive way of getting optimization. For our cubes, those are automated as well. You can, if you choose, create cubes on your own. We have that capability, but we highly recommend our customers to stick with the AutoCube capabilities. So the cubes are automatically generating. They're highly adaptive. So as analyses change and evolve over time, people can take advantage of the cubes that have been built. And our optimizer knows how to build the certain cubes and how to build what kinds of cubes and leverages them for speed. I'd like to stop here so I can bring it over to Tom but if anyone has any additional questions, because this was a very short overview, we'll save questions for the end. And if you'd like to have a deeper conversation of what Jethro can do, we can certainly schedule a meeting afterwards. So thank you, and Tom, take it away.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? Are you guys there?
We can, yep.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. All right, so our company is Aunalytics, and we were started about 3 or 4 years, 5 years ago now, and we exist basically to assist companies in their analytics pursuits. So and so on. So when we jumped into this, the Hadoop was becoming a thing, and all of those types of initiatives were starting to happen across companies. And when we dug into it, we knew what we were experts in. We're in Indiana. We're somewhat affiliated with some of the universities in the area. We have a lot of PhD type people that are deep into the data analytics side of things. So that's where our strength is. We're very good at getting data sets and boiling them down for customers to get some value out of. And when we dug into this, we really realized that there's a lot of parts and pieces to an analytics workflow. So if you guys want to switch to the next slide, I'll just point out this is just kind of something that was funny that we ran into. But there was you guys can go ahead and change whenever you're ready. There was literally hundreds of, yeah, there you go. So this is the analytics, and this is, I think, a couple years ago, but this is what we had found. So we were looking at, where we fit into this and what all the products were that were out there to do an analytics workflow for people. And we also realized that most companies that we were talking to didn't really realize how in-depth it was, as we didn't initially. I mean, as I said, we were experts in what we did, which was the simple analysis of the data, but all of the parts and pieces to actually deliver insights and value to the people that need it in a timely fashion involved some combination of all of these vendors here and so on. We were trying to fit and so on. So it's a complicated environment, to say the least, and so on. So what we did, and if you guys want to switch to the next slide, go ahead, was we set about putting these things together into a workflow process and writing our own code to stitch some things together and to do some of our own work. So what we do here, just in a nutshell, is collect data from various sources on behalf of customers or help them to do so. So we will, if you look at the left of the slide here, we'll collect data from customers' internal data sources, that SQL servers, Oracle servers, things of that nature, IoT data from the cloud, things of that nature. We do some things with, IIoT, so we're collecting information from machinery and things of that nature. And we bring all of those things into an environment that we've created here in our data center through a data gateway, which is a product that we created. So we realized that most people are not going to be able to collect data in a repeatable fashion from 20 or 30 distinct separate locations and aggregate them all every day in a repeatable fashion, at least not easily. So that was one of the things that we wrote. And if you see here, all of these pieces are things that we've stitched together. So Data Flow Manager, Data Science Lab are tools that we've made for our customers to be able to take these terabytes of data and crunch them down into more usable sets and so on. So, and if you notice, you can go over to the next slide. We have this thing that we refer to as accelerated data access, and that really is Jethro. And the way that came was that we had built this entire thing. So we spent a lot of investment, a lot of time building a solution for these customers. And we would boil the data down, and we would always tell people, basically, hey, we're going to boil this data down to from 10 terabytes down to considerably smaller. And that might be, considerably smaller might be 1 terabyte, but it might also only be 100 gig. And we would deliver that to people through various methods, either command line or even through Tableau or things of that nature. and realized very quickly, and the way that this was realized was in one of our test phases, our CEO, who is, a business person and was really trying to use and test some of the things that we were about to deliver to a large customer, came back to us and said, this is great. All the data is perfect. All the insights are perfect. You're delivering great value to people. The problem is that, and this is very literally, they will click on something and wait, they'll go get coffee while the queries return. And this was not with a lot of data. I mean, we had boiled something down from terabytes to gigabytes, or hundreds of gigabytes, and really no matter what we did using various tools, we could always get the data out we wanted. The customers agreed it was good, but it was very much impossible for a customer to interact with it at human speed. So all of these types of tools, Hadoop and so on, which are batch in nature, and I know that there's Spark and things that are in memory and so on, but at the end of the day, you're submitting jobs to these things, and they're coming back to you as if you're a process, which people are not. So, for a person to wait more than 2 seconds from click to click, or 5 seconds or 10 seconds from click to click, becomes annoying and unusable very quickly, and so on. And so we really talked about it, and we said, we need to find something to solve this. So we set out about this. I came across the Jethro guys, and I think we got involved around version 1, very, very early on, and we tried it out. So basically, at that time, we had downloaded it, and one of our guys here installed it. And I think that by the next day, we had simply repointed I think it was Tableau we were using, and I think we're using some other products for testing as well. And we simply repointed them to this source, as opposed to the other 4 or 5 sources that we had tried, which were a combination of, Postgres or your the usual suspects. And we immediately got a call from our CEO that said, this is completely different. It's completely usable. So I think that in reality that day, the difference was down from 10 or 15 minute query times down to 5 or 6 seconds for the things that we were doing. And as we refined it, we got it, down under 1 or 2 seconds at the time. And we rolled that out to the team literally within the first 24 hours. And that was, and it changed. Everyone was able to work as people work at that human speed. Meanwhile, while we did our job. So that, there was a lot more work to do, but these guys supported us and so on. And that was a very good first 24 hours with a product, especially for a version 1. And we've been with them this was even before cubes and all of those other things. So that is that. And if you want to pop to the next slide, where we got to after that was, we really realized that needs to be a part of our product. We weren't going to write it in the, we weren't going to write it in any ourselves. It wasn't something that we were going to invest time or money or quite frankly had the expertise to do, especially when we could simply implement it. And it looks like this slide is automated, so you can just step through it if you want to get just fill it all the way in. But when we do our roadmap is basically, as you see here, we will set up an analytics ready compute cluster for people. We will, our engineers will work with the customer, aggregate all the data. We will create these high volume data sets, and we were done there. But as I said, what we didn't realize was that it doesn't take long. It doesn't. You do not have to be talking about billions of rows or terabytes. You really, once you get into the even several gig, it's not human speed anymore, no matter what you do. So we really realized that we cannot deliver or cannot easily deliver a reasonable analytics experience to the customers that we are trying to serve without something like this. And we started talking to these guys and ended up making it a part of our solution. So they're fully integrated. We're fully integrated together. We recommend it. We have customers that we recommend it to. They now buy it, and so on. And it's been a good experience. But in a nutshell, that's that's the story. That's how we found these guys. As far as the other experience, support, they've always been excellent and quick at supporting us. We have good access to the people we need, and we use this in a commercial product that we sell daily, and we have happy clients. So I don't know I don't know what else I can answer any questions that anyone has about our rollout, or I don't know where you guys want me to take it from there.
Yeah, let's. Thank you very much for that, Tom. Let's hold off for questions until the end of the webinar. So hang on for another 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to pass it over to Vaidy. One second. There we go.
Yeah.
Vaidy, feel free to take over, and I'll.
Will do. Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys. Again, my name is Vaidy. Just by way of introduction, I lead product marketing here for Tableau, where I manage our story, positioning, and go-to-market strategy vis-a-vis technology partners. And today, I'll be talking about some high-level strategies our customers are using to manage big data with Tableau. And of course, how our partnership with Jethro helps that, and what the customer covered a little earlier today was one application of the strategy. Next slide. So our mission is to help people see and understand data. I mean, personally, I think the most important word in that mission statement is people. We believe people of all skill sets, regardless of job role, function, or even skill, should be empowered to harness the power of data, and that is something that's a mission statement that is timeless. It was formulated when we were founded back in 2003, and it continues to be the same. Next slide. And data for us is all data. So if you look at the spectrum of big data versus small data, we can see that the tools we use at each end, and next slide, I think it's a build, Michael. Yeah. So the tools we use at each end of the spectrum are different. So it's not viable to use complex high-end tools for simple problems over a few thousand records, nor is it viable to solve complex queries over a billion records with Excel. However, with Tableau, next click, you will have a single tool that lets you span the continuum of your needs, and we're able to provide that value to customers, by dint of all the great partnerships that we have, including the one with Jethro, that help enhance the value of what Tableau provides to customers. Next slide. So I want to do a double click today on how a lot of our customers are managing and analyzing big data with Tableau. And of course, the challenge is people want low latency query response times when visualizing and exploring big data. Now, initially, the big data and the Hadoop ecosystem were developed more in line with batch processing in mind rather than for interactive querying. So as many of you may be knowing, Hadoop was invented by Yahoo, and the initial use cases were mostly to index the internet. That's what MapReduce was originally used for. Now, over time, we've seen the development of query engines like Impala and Spark, and some great acceleration products like Jethro, which we've seen several of our customers use to provide lower latency queries. And over the next couple of slides, we'll look at a strategy employed by some of our customers, which has allowed them to provide their users with an interactive visualization experience while retaining access to data from large data sets. Next slide. So the strategy we're going to talk about, and many of you may have seen this being expressed different ways. There's different nomenclatures. I like to call it cold, warm, hot. Some other customers have called it raw, analytical, raw entity type, and analytical. So the idea here is, next slide, that you have a large cold data store of raw or unprepared data. This could be structured or unstructured, that is used for data exploration, use, and query responses may be slow. And this is where your data lakes typically, or this is where your data lands from IoT type data, from home automation systems, from sensors, and what have you. Next is warm data, which is data that has been prepared or ETL'd and is typically in a relational data warehouse or fast analytical database. And finally, we have the hot tier. So this is typically smaller in-memory data sets used on the highest value visualizations where performance is super critical. So this is the tier that would typically be used to answer the known questions for the known answers. So think of, how are my sales doing relative to quota, or how many widgets did we sell in this particular county, over the last couple of years, right? So this is the exact same questions that's going to be asked over and over again, and where the expectation or the acceptability is for response times that are less than a couple of seconds or so. Next slide, or next click, I should say. So with the rate of, the rate at which database technology is advancing, there's obviously going to be some overlap, but broadly speaking, we see the Hadoop ecosystem in the cold tier. This is the place for storing large volumes of structured and unstructured information. In the middle, we saw relational databases. And in the hot tier, there's a few different, strategies I've seen customers use. Obviously, they could, have a little semantic layer between Tableau and Hadoop. They could resort to Tableau data extracts, if they're doing that, we always recommend that customers use guided analysis methods in Tableau to build out interactive visualizations, that leverage the highest, value elements while providing a path to drill down into the granular data when needed. Next slide. So in terms of personas, again, we think of three classes of users that are, leveraging big data, and this is a build, Michael. So let's step through these one at a time. You have the data scientists that, they're exploring and mining raw data files. They're very comfortable writing code, Python, Scala, Java. They move data around, creating data sets. And they are, in many cases, they want to identify subsets of the raw unstructured, the trillions and billions of rows, subsets of those data sets that are worth analyzing further. So they may be looking at, well, either they want to just look at, exploring in an ad hoc way 8 trillion records, or they may be looking at, hey, I don't even know how to make sense of this information. Why don't I take a subset of this and try to figure out what are some questions worth asking? So those are some of the typical use cases. They would connect to this low-level data from Tableau Desktop via Hive, via Impala, Apache Drill, or Spark SQL. Query response may be super slow or even poor. But they're conducting, this off-road exploration and don't often anticipate sub-second response times, right? Then, of course, you have the analysts, and these guys, they are performing large-scale data discovery. They're creating new reports, they're migrating reports, they're publishing reports to Tableau server, and they're accessing data from what I call the warm tier. Where data has been, next click, Michael, where data has been, repurposed via ETL into an RDBMS engine of their choice. And finally, you have the dashboard consumers, right? These are, customers who are, next click, they're accessing dashboards via web browsers, mobile devices, next click. They expect highly performant dashboards. And this is where a technology like Jethro is super, super helpful, right? Because it makes Hadoop appear to be just another data mart without moving data around. It provides in-memory computing, native-like ingestion, as opposed to what would feel like more clunky ETL. And increasingly, we're seeing that this warm tier is shrinking as technologies in the hot tier, are crowding those warm tier technologies out. So, that's all I had. And, I would end by saying that, we have several customers who are deploying these components in different ways. And I don't have a slide, but you can just go to the Tableau website. Netflix, Airbnb, and Facebook, and GoPro, and Edmunds.com. A lot of these customers, they have deployed Tableau on top of a big data stack, and have make self-service analytics available to large swaths of users within their organization. So that's all I had, and I think we're ready to take questions now.
Great, thank you for that. So there is a Q&A section within the Zoom panel. You can please place your questions there. If you can't find that, there's also a chat section. I'm monitoring both sides. And let's start off with the first question. And the first question is, when will Jethro have a native driver for Tableau? And that is something, I guess both Vaidy and I can answer on that. That's something that we're working on. It's something that will take some time. And we're looking forward here at Jethro to having that native connectivity. That's something that's been moving along the industry for us. So it's a very exciting time for Jethro getting these native connectivities to Tableau and other BI products. Did you want to add any commentary to that, Vaidy?
And absolutely, Mike. So, I will definitely say that our engineering teams have been working very closely together. There's great respect for each other's technologies and what we can, do to jointly help customers. When we think of, native connectors to other data sources, obviously, use cases, customer demand, those definitely factor into that consideration, and we're definitely seeing that. But in addition, we also want to make sure that we're able to have clear documentation, a clear driver install and uninstall process, and make sure that all the different boundary conditions and the edge cases are fully tested for before we launch those connectors. So it's work in progress, and you'll hear more from us soon.
So, and to add some additional commentary to the question, the writer had mentioned that Tableau says that the ODBC connection does not have all the functionality. That is a standard message that comes across with any generic ODBC data connection, but suffice to say, we have very good connectivity with Tableau. We've been working on it for quite a while with Tableau, with some of the development team in Tableau. And in fact, within our integration, we automatically installed the TDC file, which is that hint file that tells Tableau's ODBC interpreter, what things it can and can't do with our driver. And that happens automatically. So thanks for that question. Next question is, does Jethro support already written Hive queries? I would look at that a little differently. As far as what you would do with Jethro is you're pointing Jethro to the tables that you're interested in analyzing with Tableau. So there's no additional Hive queries to support. It's mainly connecting to the structure, and Jethro takes care of the rest. The next question is, does Jethro have a JDBC driver? Yes, we do. And we do have JDBC drivers. We also have some drivers for Linux as well. So feel free to go to our website. There's a driver section that has all of our up-to-date drivers along with instructions on how to install them. Next question is Jethro pricing and licensing model. So our licensing is done per server. Typically, a enterprise installation will have 3 servers to it. One server that does the building of indexes, building of cubes, and 2 additional servers that handle the query load. Those servers we do not define by counting the number of cores. So that could be, most customers are deploying between a 8 and 32 core server, and anywhere between 128 and 512 gig of RAM. And then as far as pricing, let's have a conversation with the sales team so we can make sure we give you a good price as opposed to just throwing numbers out during a webinar. See, more questions. All right. How does Jethro know new data is inserted into HDFS and then start building the cube? So what we do is define a location within Jethro that we're going to monitor. So we have a listener on that directory in that area. And once data shows up, we have a bunch of different methods in how we want to processing that. So we can add them as append files. We can take them and rename them. There's lots of things that we can do to process that data depending upon how often those data files wind up landing. They can range from, days, every day, which is a pretty typical use case for customers. But in this day and age, a lot of customers are looking for that data to get updated every 10, every 15 minutes. So we can handle those use cases as well. Next question is, would Jethro replace the need for Impala? What else would an ideal Hadoop Jethro implementation require? So as far as Impala, yes, we would. We have the potential of replacing Impala use cases when it comes to getting fast query response from BI applications out of big data. So that specific use case is where Jethro looks to help with the market, because we've seen some key ways to optimize that. I would imagine Impala can be used for a bunch of other things, and we're not going to comment on those other methods or those other use cases that Impala has. But as far as the ideal Hadoop Jethro implementation, typically what winds up happening is some of the data nodes within Hadoop can be recommissioned as edge nodes for Jethro, and we're looking for normally it's a handful of nodes, anywhere between 3, 6 to 10 nodes that are being used for Jethro for the optimization of those queries. One last question that I saw was someone was asking about the slides. I will find out about the slides, but we will have a recording of this webinar available on our website. So if you know of anyone that's missed the presentation, or if there's just something that you wanted to see again, we will have this presentation posted very soon, and emails will go out. Another question is, how is the latency from the point of when the data is inserted into HDFS to when it is ready for Tableau? Let's say 1 billion records. So as far as our ingestion rate is approximately 500 million records an hour. When we're talking about these kinds of benchmarks, there's lots of things that get involved with how the speed is, how much time and attention you want to put toward that infrastructure. So outside of that general guidance, it would be a great idea to do a proof of concept, which is something that we do quite often, to see what those use cases are, to see what those speeds are, to see if we're getting the query speed, the data freshness, and the ease of use that you're looking for. Can you send the contact details to all 3 presenters? Yes. We can send that up if, hey Remy, can you just whether make a slide or something that I can put that up on the board and send it over to me? Another question is, how do the AutoCubes processing happen? Should someone design a cube in advance, or does Jethro automatically create the cube for each table? Underlying kinds of questions. So let's unpack that one. So our auto-cubing process takes a look at the queries that get sent from Tableau to Jethro. And from those queries, we're going to see what type of dimensionality, what kinds of measures, what kinds of aggregations are needed. And we'll build like a micro aggregated table on the fly. Really what that winds up meaning is we'll take the dimensionality and we'll take the where clause and we put it in the group by clause. And that builds that aggregate table. In many cases, we'll do things that are significantly more sophisticated. Instead of just having a plain aggregate table, we may break it down so that it's more flexible and more usable for different types of queries. But again, all of that is based off of the queries that are sent from Tableau to Jethro, and we figure that out on the fly. As far as, and this kind of flows into the next question, which is what is the criteria of the design cube? Is it purely business technical? There is no design process for the cube. That's the key difference. We figured out the easiest way to design a cube is to have it build itself and design itself. So we built in the intelligence and the heuristics to interpret the queries and come up with the aggregations that are needed. That said, you can still build these aggregation tables specifically, but that's not necessary at all. The next question following on to that is, do we need to build an intermediate layer of tables between these cubes and the Hadoop Hive tables? That's not necessary. We do have the concepts of views. We do have the concept of tables, which could be used for some use cases, but typically we're going directly to the Hive tables and we're interpreting them and we're doing the joins on them and the optimization from there on out. So again, if there's any questions with regards to how any of this works, a great way to see a bit deeper under the hood is to schedule a demo with our team, and we can do a proof of concept. Oh, another question came in. So as far as who would Jethro build on-the-fly cubes running against Teradata, yes, it would essentially be the same process as it would be with Hadoop. The only difference is we would wind up needing some sort of shared storage for the Jethro servers, but that's really not part of the function. It's not part of the internal workings on how we handle creating those cubes and creating the indices. That just, again, that winds up happening. And it looks like another question. How many jobs of data ingestion and compression can Jethro process at a time on an 8-core machine in parallel? So that would definitely be a great proof of concept question, because it really is dependent upon the complexity of those jobs. Jethro is multi-threaded, so it can spool up a lot of work very quickly. And it also depends on the amount of memory that you wind up having. So all of those factors come into play. So I would suggest we test that out. So it looks like we're running perfectly on time. It's 3:45, and we may have exhausted all the questions. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to type them in, or at least say, hold on a second while you're typing. But if not, I would like to thank everyone for joining for the last 45 minutes. I would like to thank Vaidy Krishnan from Tableau for presenting his perspective on big data. I'd like to thank Tom from Data Realty for his description of what he did at Data Realty and how Jethro and Tableau came to help him. I really appreciate that story. That's fantastic. And again, if there's any questions, please let us know. You can, for those of you that were on the email list, you can send me an email, and if you needed some contact information from people, I can send that through. So again, thanks everyone for joining, and talk to everyone soon.